Hello, I am so glad you've joined us again this afternoon. I'm Dr. Brenda Murphy, and I'm an educational psychologist with Sail Away Learning Academy. And today we have with us Carol Slatas, who is a school counselor at Farragut Intermediate School in Knoxville, Tennessee. And we have been sharing a lot of important ideas about developing strong at-home relationships with parents and children and with schools. And today, knowing that the 2021 school year will be beginning in some form or other, there is a major topic that we often talk about with younger children. It's called separation anxiety. All of us who've had children, I would imagine that at some point our children experienced a form of separation anxiety. We may even remember experiencing it ourselves. And so, Carol, as we approach this new year, I have a question. I've been really concerned about how can we deal with the separation anxiety that children typically feel or may feel at the beginning of a new school year, and what might we be looking at in this school year that we may never have experienced before?
Well, yeah, I think it is going to be different. I am going to join you in that kind of concern, not really worry, but just concern to the point where I think we need to prepare ourselves that this year we might see a large increase in separation anxiety type behavior. I want to point out that it's actually very common to have separation anxiety. It's one of the most commonly diagnosed conditions in children. And like you said, most parents have experienced that with their child, and that individuals experience separation anxiety when they have a fear of the world and the unknown. And so since we have so much of that unknown right now, I just do think that it's going to be a little bit of a concern and something that we need to be able to recognize, and two, really have a good conversation and know what to do if that is what's happening. Because one third of children who have separation anxiety will not grow out of it and will develop into an adult who has separation anxiety.
Oh my, that's a pretty startling statistic. A third, which means there are that many, at least, people in our society that have this kind of anxiety. And we know that anxiety can trigger all sorts of detrimental effects, both physically, psychologically, as well as practically in one's life. So, as we said, how would we recognize the anxiety behavior? Because, when our children are, 2, 3, 4, maybe just going into preschool or kindergarten, we recognize that they're kind of going to cling to mama.
Yeah.
And they're going to hold back, or to daddy. And so we recognize that. We just say that's what growing up, part of learning about a new thing. How can we recognize this separation anxiety in maybe a child who's always been excited about going to school, but these new situations? What should parents be looking for?
One big thing is to look for behavioral signs and stuff, and the clinginess is definitely one way that it could present, but another way that is surprising to a lot of people is anger. A lot of anxiety, any types of anxiety, not just separation anxiety, can really present in a form of anger. And so this kind of goes back to one of our previous conversations about really identifying what are the feelings behind the anger.
Yeah.
Another thing is to look for signs of physical symptoms of anxiety. So the most common ones are stomach aches and headaches and things like that. Now, I will say, you always want to make sure. My mother was a nurse, and she always made sure to emphasize that you make sure that there isn't something physical going on first. Before, you don't want to just assume all stomach aches is anxiety. But if you've really investigated that with your pediatrician and your child is having a lot of stomach aches and headaches and things like that, pay attention to when they're occurring. A lot of separation anxiety is anticipatory. And what they mean by that is that like Sunday night, you're having it about going to school on Monday morning, things like that. So be on the lookout for some of those signs, but also be aware that one of the most common things is anger. anxiety will present as anger.
And often with anger, we've talked about too how we deal with certain kinds of emotions. What would you recommend that parents do when they're recognizing this in their children, especially at what age would you say that it may be a non-developmental? Like we know separation anxiety normally.
Yeah.
By what age? You're laughing. Okay.
No, I think that's a really important question. Anytime there's been any sort of transition in terms of something really new being introduced. So the most common time to see separation anxiety, and it's still to be considered not diagnosable, it's considered part of the normal development, is when they're younger and you're introducing them to lots of new things. So, and as you're introducing, as the comfort level they become more comfortable, that anxiety should decrease. And so anytime something new, you're going off to kindergarten, that should be expected. A large percentage of students will have some sort of form of separation anxiety going to kindergarten, even going to middle school, going from middle school to high school to college, right? That's all normal.
Find that.
Yeah.
Thank you, because in reality, parents, when they're seeing those things in their older children, should not minimize it then or belittle them. I mean, this is a light bulb for me that in relationships, I do see this, is especially when you're transitioning from middle school to high school, and then from high school to college, that it's important that we as parents recognize that the same syndrome or the same anxiety that we were tolerant of when they were 5 may be the same thing at different ages. And so how, especially from going from, say, elementary school to middle school and from middle school to high school, how can parents really help their children make those transitions? Because that will still be there.
So what the anxiety comes from is kind of this unknown and stuff. So I think it's important to not diagnose someone as having separation anxiety just because they're struggling during a time period of transition. Okay, so that's really important to say, because everyone will experience that. If it persists for a very long period of time, that's when you want to say, okay, there's something more here. But whether it's something that persists or it's a kind of acute situation that's going on, the most important thing is helping your child recognize and overriding the natural response that our bodies have. So some people are just, in general, they're designed to be more anxious.
Yes.
And when you get into the science of it, their amygdala, which is a part of your brain, is reacting in a way, it's overreacting. So the biggest thing with any type of anxiety, so today we're talking about separation anxiety, but any type of anxiety is to recognize that and help your child recognize that their response is not proportionate to the situation.
Oh, I like that. Yes. Yes.
And so their amygdala is running wild with what could happen. And so here's where you can get into making a plan. So a lot of times when students come into my office, I talk with them about fire drills. Why do we do fire drills? It's not likely to happen. Right? It's not likely to happen, but when we are prepared, we know what to do that should lower our anxiety. So that's why when people are making transitions, let's say our 5th graders are going off to the middle school, we go over, we visit, we have middle schoolers talk about the experience, give them an opportunity to ask questions, things like that. All of those things go a really long way in minimizing that anxiety for these students. So one big thing I do is I think about our brain like a hand, and a lot of counselors will do this, but here's your amygdala on the inside, and here's your thinking brain over it. When our amygdala starts kind of overreacting, it pushes away our ability to think clearly. So you can, as a parent, can kind of step in and help provide the support to say, it's going to be okay, you'll be fine, here's what we have in place to help you and to help kind of develop that plan. So a big thing is helping them push through the anxiety. When you talk about anxiety with any counselors or therapists or anything, the overriding, the biggest approach that is the most successful is overriding and using what's called cognitive behavioral therapy to then override their thinking process to shift that.
Yeah, and one of the things as you were talking, it kind of dawned on me that as professionals, we're more concerned because of the unique situation that our children have been placed in. And so, for example, your children who are in the 5th grade haven't had that opportunity to go to the middle school. Mm-hmm. So in order to maybe minimize separation anxiety in children who typically wouldn't have experienced it, but maybe because the safeguards that would have typically been put in place, what are some of the things either maybe the schools are doing that you're aware of?
Yep.
If not, what are the parents doing?
Well, I know for us, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but that was a big thing that I was concerned about. And I reached out to the middle school and the counselor over there, and we talked about it, but they already had it in the works. Like they were already on it, and they have had a lot of opportunities. They're going to have social distancing tours where you can sign up at different times to come around. They're going to do some virtual talks with kids. So they're doing a lot of the same things, but in a different way to make sure that students are familiar and know the information they need to feel better about the transition.
Well, how can parents help support those initiatives?
I think it's a matter if your school district or people aren't already doing it, kind of asking, what can we do? Can we brainstorm some ways to kind of put these things in place? Just kind of drawing it to the attention that this is something that you want.
Yeah. Do you think that parents, to kind of help themselves and their children be strong at home going into this, unknown season, how might parents just begin this conversation with their children to maybe diffuse a potential separation anxiety that would normally not be there?
I think I would ask, I'm thinking just about as a parent, I would ask, like, what are some of the things maybe after the school has done something to present, what are some of the things you still have questions about or making you nervous, whatever, get that information back to them. And then kind of showing them a plan of what they can do to walk through this. Again, the idea is not to avoid the anxiety. The best thing to do is to get through it. And then once they've gotten through it, they realize what were the skills they needed. So having a plan is important, teaching them ways to calm their body physically by like taking deep breaths. There's tons of activities out there on deep breathing. You can just Google, deep breathing activities, square breathing, Magic 5, all these different ones. But also talking about having ongoing conversations where your children feel comfortable sharing how they're feeling is important as well. So teaching them those skills. And even though it's uncomfortable, if they can push through that, that's what's going to be ultimately most successful. So if your child is experiencing that separation anxiety, you need to let them go through it. Teach them the skills, but then help them go through it. So the longer you stay at school, I know with the kindergartners, the longer the parents stay at school, the worse it is.
Yeah.
And most 99.999% of the time, within 5 minutes, probably within 2 minutes after the parents have left, it has calmed down.
Yeah.
They are able to get to class. So if you want to have a transition plan where you drop your child with a staff member, like someone like the counselor or their teacher can meet them, or a friend even. I've had sometimes a friend meet them as they're walking in and kind of come in together. You can check back with the teacher and you'll find out that they are fine and they have pushed through it. And that's one of that success is going to lead to more and more and more success. And the more success they have, the less anxious they'll be.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, let me just close very quickly. What about parents' separation anxiety? Because
yeah,
I know that's a whole nother topic, but it just dawned on me that as a parent, especially in this situation, 2021, what might parents do to help their own separation anxiety?
Well, I think it's the same thing, is that you need to have faith and trust in a plan. Like that there are safety things in place. And right now there's a lot of stuff that's uncertain. So I think that's why we do have heightened anxiety, because it's new. Like no one else I know has been through this except my husband's 100-year-old grandmother, because she has lived through the Spanish flu. But we haven't really been through this, so there's a lot of unknowns. But if you take the time to do the same things with yourself, you don't want to transfer your anxiety onto your children. So anxiety is considered something that is strongly genetically connected, but you also could make a really good debate for, are they learning it through watching it too? So you've got to be really careful of that nurture versus nature.
Yes.
And so, but one of the things with the separation anxiety going into adulthood, like I said, that 1/3, you might think, well, who are they anxious from separating from? It's usually their children. So it relates into then you having issue with letting go of your child. So it comes from a place of fear. And when you recognize what it is, you have to have the skills to work through it and to have a plan if something were to happen, whatever it is you're afraid of, here's what you can do.
Absolutely. That is great wisdom. So I hear the word plan, and I've heard it in lots of our conversations. So plan is really important in a lot of these ways that we become strong at home. And our time is up again. Carol, thank you so much for more wisdom and great information, tons of good information. And so as we close, we will close with our blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Peace, Carol, and we will see you soon. Again, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.